One day, 5 people from all different walks of life, all different beliefs, and all different faiths found themselves together. They heard of a family that was suffering 10 miles from where they were. One of the 5 was a Christian. One of the 5 was a Muslim. One of the 5 was a Buddhist. One of the 5 was an atheist. And one of the 5 was a follower of the Hindu faith. One of the 5 carried food. One of the 5 carried medical supplies. One of the 5 had the skills to build a shelter. One of the 5 had the words to provide comfort. And one of the 5 had quite simply the loving embrace that all those that suffer require. The 5 had one thing in common. They all wished to help the family that was suffering. So together they embarked on the journey to reach that family. As they began their journey, 1 mile in, they began to have a conversation. They did not speak about what was ahead of them. They did not speak of the suffering or the journey or what they will do to help. Instead, they spoke about their own individual and internal beliefs. The Christian said, "Do you not all know that Jesus Christ is the only way to God, for he is the one and only Son of God?" The Muslim smiled and said, "I'm sorry, but you're wrong, for I and my family have found God. And we call that God Allah, and the man Jesus Christ did not lead us there." The Buddhist said to both, "You would both do well to learn from the Buddha, to practice a silent mind, to reach nirvana, where you commune with God internally, instead of arguing about different scriptures and deities." The follower of the Hindu faith said to the Buddhist, "You should accept others' beliefs if you have such a silent mind." Before long, they began to argue. The Christian argued that Jesus was the only Son of God. The Buddhist argued that they should be silent, and this is how they will find God. The follower of the Hindu faith protested that Krishna had the true teachings to reach God, and the Muslim proclaimed that Allah was the one true God. As they argued, the atheist grew so uncomfortable. He said, "I've had enough. I can't walk with you people any longer, for you argue and waste your energy trying to prove the existence of something that does not exist." With that, the atheist turned his back on the group and walked away. The Christian and the Muslim began to argue more heatedly, and before long they too turned their backs on one another and went their own way. The Hindu and the Buddhist also grew to the point where they could no longer bear one another's company, and due to their arguing and due to their protesting of their own beliefs, they too turned their backs on one another and went their own way. And miles down the road lay the family, suffering, and no one came. The next day, 5 people found themselves in exactly the same position as the 5 before. One of the 5 was a Christian, one of the 5 was a Muslim, one of the 5 was a Hindu, one of the 5 was a Buddhist, and one of the 5 was an atheist. They heard of the family that suffered 10 miles away from where they were, knowing that together they could end the suffering of the family. For one carried food, one carried medical supplies, one had the skills to build a shelter, one had the words to bring the much needed comfort, and one had the loving embrace which all of those who suffer require. This group of 5, however, had something different from the other group. They had 2 unions. One union was that they wanted to help and to end the suffering of the family that they had heard about. But the other union they had was that they had all in their own way found ways in life to silence their minds and thus live from their hearts. The Christian had fasted, as his Messiah asks, and in fasting he understood the importance of silencing the mind and walking from your heart. The Muslim too had honoured the teachings of his faith, and during the period of Ramadan had learned how to silence his mind and overcome the wants of his animal nature and the intellect that governs it. The Buddhist was a master of meditation. Unlike the Buddhist the day before, he had truly mastered that which the Buddha spoke of. He had mastered inner peace, and with it, a heart-centered being. The follower of the Hindu faith had practiced Kriya Yoga, and in doing so had also learned how to come into the very center of themselves and how to silence their mind and to allow themselves to live from a more heart-centered position. The atheist among them had not fasted and had not prayed and had not learned to meditate. He was, however, an endurance athlete. And as an endurance athlete, he too had learned to have dominion over his 5 senses and his lower nature. The 5 began to walk. The journey would be 10 miles to reach that family that suffered. 1 mile in, and a thought arose in the Christian's mind. I am with all of these people of other faiths. I should tell them that the only way they will reach God is through His one and only Son, Jesus Christ. But the Christian remembered that right now, to do God's work, they all had to arrive together, and to speak these words would not end the suffering of that family that lay ahead of them. So he walked in silence and non-judgment. The Muslim by his side began to wonder if he should speak of Allah and the Prophet Muhammad. But he too realized that sharing his own beliefs will not do anything to complete God's work and help those in need and those that suffer before him. So he too remained silent and spoke no words. The follower of the Hindu faith had a thought that he might discuss the teachings of Krishna with the atheist to his side, and how in following Krishna he had found a union, an irrefutable union and presence with the Lord. However, he realized that when he had practiced yoga and his mind was silent, that he could witness the love of God in people before him, even if they did not use the words that he did to say that he believed in God. So he too stayed silent. The atheist very much wished to challenge everybody with him and to tell them, God does not exist, no one has proved it. But he knew that this was his mind, this was his ego, this was the weakness of the human nature. For he had challenged this when he was doing endurance exercise, and had tried to get him to stop. So knowing that his goal was to help the family that was suffering, he chose not to do anything that might stop them from reaching that end goal, and he too stayed silent about his beliefs. The Buddhist walked silently, practicing the quiet mind. He wondered about explaining the benefits of meditation to the two persons to his right who followed religions that were responsible for so much pain and suffering and war. However, he remembered that even in his religion people got it wrong, for they did not practice the silent mind. So he too remained quiet, in the hope that they would all reach together, that family that suffered. In silence, the 5 people from all different walks of life, all different faiths and all different beliefs, walked together to reach the suffering family. When they got there, the Christian man began to build them a shelter. The Muslim man began to provide words of comfort. The Buddhist began to feed them. The atheist provided the loving embrace that they all needed. And the follower of the Hindu faith provided the medical care. The suffering family laid there, filled with such love and gratitude. Their stomachs were full. Their health was improving. They had shelter above their heads. Before them were 5 people from all walks of life, and all different faiths, and all different beliefs. And in those people, the suffering family found their own faith, and with it they found an end to their suffering. And the 5 who made that journey silently smiled at one another, realizing that they had a common union that day of love. And one man among them saw love as the man Jesus Christ. The next man saw love as Allah. The next man saw love as Nirvana. The next man saw love as Krishna. And the next man saw love, quite simply, as love. But however you labelled it, that suffering family found faith in that energy which drove the 5 to help them.